Hi, I'm Bob,
Hey, and I'm Archie.
and we're talking about Bob and Archie's life in high tech and lessons learned.
Very good.
All right, we're doing a series of podcasts and to discuss our experiences, adventures, life lessons, even some hijinks that we've had along the way in our careers.
There have been a lot of those.
Yes, they have been. Yeah, I think you'll get a kick out of that. We'll discuss some history too, as part of the industry that we kind of grew up in. And we hope that our life lessons and these stories will amuse you and inform you, and hopefully you'll find some use for them. I think the first thing we should do is explain what is a technical writer.
Yeah, I know when we talk about our life in industry, I guess we should point out that we were technical writers for most of our careers.
Yeah, most of our
Most
careers.
of our careers. A lot of this podcast will be focused a little bit on technical writing, but there's a lot of the lessons learned are universal. But to start, when we talk about technical writing, there's at least three levels of technical writer that I've discovered over the years, and I guess I've been one of these writers at each point in my career. So in the beginning, the lowest level of technical writer, I shouldn't say lowest level, but the most basic level of technical writer is
Basic,
basic.
good.
Yeah, basic. It's basically a technical editor writer. There was a time in the tech industry where they had editors. The writers would write and the editors would edit the stuff and clean it up and make sure it was grammatically correct and all that stuff.
Yes, I've seen them. They're usually English majors.
That's right. But at some point, industry decided that technical editors were superfluous and started to fire all of them. So most of those editors had no choice but to become writers. So what they offer is the same. It's the same skill, but they just call themselves writers now. So if engineers do most of the writing at your company, you would probably hire someone like this who would then take that engineering copy and turn it into something pristine, correct the prose, convey the information better.
Make it readable.
Make it readable. So that's kind of the first tier of technical writing. The second tier, I would say, would be engineering writers, people who are very technical. They usually come from technical, they former software engineers, former electrical engineers, former mechanical engineers who enjoy writing. So they'll tend to be very, very much involved in development. They'll be able to really have a good relationship with the technical people, the engineers in your company, but their writing will have a tendency to be technically focused. And I should have mentioned that the first tier of writer, their writing style would end up being sort of product focused. They're going to talk about how the product works, that sort of thing, while the engineering writer would really talk about the technology and get into technical stuff, and their writing will be technically focused. Okay.
Exactly. I've seen a lot of that writing, and it's mostly a technical person to a technical person. And if you're naive, you're out of luck.
That's right. That's right. And then the third tier of technical writing is, I would call them an information designer. And what they do is they take a holistic approach to documentation or into writing. What they're going to be looking at is, what's the product? What's the technology? Who's using it? When they're using it? You know, to use human factors terms, they're going to be looking at personas, and that's the highest level of technical writer. It's the kind of thing that most of those technical writers are people with 10 to 20 years of experience. They've seen a lot more things, and they understand that technical writing is more than just producing user guides. So their writing will have a tendency. So what they would tend to produce is an information suite that covers all the things that I just mentioned.
And that's basically what we have evolved to over our respective careers. And we do a lot of this.
Yes, and as an aside, Bob and I have a combined 80 years of experience in this industry.
You would bring that up, wouldn't you? Okay, yeah. We
We're-
do have a lot of experience
We're
here.
old guys. Yeah, yeah.
So how did you get into this writing?
When coming out of high school, I was steered towards a technical career. This is a while ago, as I said, 40 years or so ago, and so that was the opportunity. I mean, I remember when I told my mother that I was going to be a technical writer. She said, "Well, I won't go into that." But she wasn't very happy. But I went to school for engineering. I realized that calculus and I were not good friends. And so I was looking for an alternative. So at the time, they had just hired a freelance writer as a professor at my college. And he talked the staff, the management, the head of the English department to add technical writing. And so I had been taking some of his classes and he was talking about it. And we had a conversation. We became friends, actually. And that's how I got into technical writers. Me and one other kid, we were the first two students in that program. And I think that program was one of the first programs because back then they didn't even call it technical writing. My degree is in journalism with a minor in engineering.
My path was a little different. I was actually hired by Honeywell to work on their computers. I was a test technician at first in their manufacturing plant. Started following the engineering path. I became an assistant engineer and a project leader on some of the boards I was doing. Now, let me explain what boards are. Our computers were based on these like 8-inch by 8-inch boards. One board for memory, one board for your CPU, one board to talk to peripherals like disk drives, the size of wash machines. And yes, if you watch those old 50s movies, those tape drives, I can tell you they were annoying.
Okay, so as an aside, I have to mention, if you've ever seen, okay, so now they have these handheld scanners where you just run it over a page and it scans in all the text. The Kurzweil, which was one of the first scanners, can fill a room.
Yes.
Okay, it did the same thing.
So yeah, it was all that. So I was working on those, and I was very much into the engineering path. I wanted to stay on that. However, in order to develop my career, I needed to be in the R&D plant, research and development, which was a separate facility. I wasn't the only technician that wanted to do that. Everybody wanted to do that. Seniority at that time was very important, more so than skill set. The only thing that was more important than seniority was what the engineers wanted. Therefore, I had to get to the engineers and kind of beat out all those people who were more senior than me. Therefore, I found a position in the R&D plant. They called for a writer. And I said, well, yeah, I can write. I'd be required to be there for 9 months. Well, yeah, I could fudge that. I'll get to talk with the engineers. I'll do my time, and then I'll make them see that I'm the one they need, and I'll be a happy engineer. Didn't work. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it didn't work out that way. I found that I was with what you call the basic tier of writers. Most people were former teachers and English majors, and they were doing a good job of making things sound great. But I knew how it worked, and it didn't work out. The documentation didn't really reflect that. So I was what you somewhat call the second tier. I was technically knowledgeable, so I could write from one technical person to another. However, I always had this knack to talk to the person who was using it because I was the user of their documentation when I was in the manufacturing plant. I realized soon I could make a big difference here, and I had an aptitude for it, and thus started my writing career, and I stayed. I never went back into engineering.
I have to admit, my first job when I out of college was working at a board level as well. I mean, I was working for AT&T Bell Labs, and yeah, I was looking at circuit descriptions and on circuit boards, talking about paths and all this stuff, electrical engineering stuff. Okay.
I used to fix those boards. I would find the paths that were broken, the chips that weren't working, so on and so forth. It was pretty interesting. I mean, now you would just throw the chip away and throw a new piece in. And
as we were talking about the different tiers of technical writing, I was kind of similar to you. Although I came in as a writer-editor, I had some technical knowledge. So I always tell this story because it's kind of funny. I'm working on a circuit board. The engineer wrote a description, and I'm looking at it and I'm editing it to make it readable. He had a logic diagram, and then he had a write-up. I'm looking at the logic diagram, and he has a NAND gate, and I won't go into what that is, but it should have been an AND gate. And in his write-up, he said it was an AND gate. So I call up the engineer. He goes, well, your drawing says this. Your writing says this. Which is it? Now, all of a sudden, I'm a superstar because I actually understood what I was writing about. So,
for those of you who know Boolean, that's what it is.
There you go.
I was in the same kind of position. I started writing my first document. Engineers realized that they didn't have to describe things for me. They started sending the other writers to me, which caused some awkwardness. But well, we got past that. So one of the things I want to point out was that neither one of us went in to become a technical writer. We both went in for different reasons. There was an opportunity. We saw it. We explored it. It changed our careers. The one thing we like to pass on is keep an open mind, recognize opportunities, and the path you're on may not be the path you need to stay on.
Absolutely.
Don't be afraid of change.
Absolutely. And I'll just add one other story. Is after I changed majors, right? They give you sunshine and roses. Yeah, technical writing is a great career, blah, blah, blah. I'd never heard of it either when I got into it. So I'm at this world-class engineering school, and the companies are coming to recruit engineers. And so I had just changed majors. I'm like, okay. As I said, my mother didn't approve. So I had to make sure that, that there was real jobs here. So I went to the recruiters. I went to each recruiter that was there that day, and I asked them, okay, so what are your opportunities for technical writers? Yeah, it was like I had two heads. Most of the recruiters had no idea what I was talking about, but I will give Raytheon credit. The Raytheon recruiter says, well, I'm not sure, but I'll look into it for you. And as I was leaving, he goes, and if we have any summer internships, would you be interested? Sure. I didn't expect to hear from him, but boom, that was my first summer job, working at Raytheon.
And I promise you folks that we will get past the 1970s sometime. Not in this podcast, but we'll definitely do that and get on to more current events.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Like you said, there's a lot of hijinks. We've been through a lot of stuff. Companies come and go. Yeah, when we get into that, there's no security anywhere. So the idea is to be open to opportunities, as you said.
Be open to opportunities. Enhance your skill set. Have confidence in yourself. Do what you feel is really, really right. But let's talk about some of the companies we worked at. Some of them exist. A lot of them don't.
Okay, so I'll have to start because, you go to what you think are stable companies. So as I said, I graduated from college, and my second internship in my senior year was at AT&T Bell Labs. At this point, I'm sure most of the people listening to this have never heard of AT&T Bell Labs because they're gone. But AT&T was the largest employer in America at the time.
Google it.
Exactly. It was the largest employer in America at the time, and I went there and I said, yeah, this is my career. I'll be here. Bell Labs was a fascinating place. It was a research and development arm of AT&T. And of course, AT&T itself doesn't exist anymore. The name does, but the company does not. So I went there, and as I mentioned, stable, the biggest employer in the world, gone. In the country, rather, gone. From there, I went to Digital Equipment Corporation, which was, of course, the largest employer in New England at the time. And of course, they're gone.
And that's where we met.
That's right. That's right.
So we're both writers for the same group, and that's how we got together in the first place. But that's a fascinating story unto itself.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, I've worked for Digital, Honeywell Computer Systems, which no longer exists. Honeywell does in thermostats. I saw the downfall of it. One amazing story was we were talking about something called an internet. And we were making some equipment to tap into this internet so computers might talk to each other someday. And while I was working on this project, the VP saw no market in it and decided to cancel it. That's one of the famous meetings I was at.
And of course, we have to, most people in New England know the story of Digital, where Ken Olsen?
Ken Olsen was the founder,
His famous quote was, who needs a computer in their home? So we never pursued PCs. And that was the downfall of Digital.
Digital had its other problems, but they had amazing technology. Unfortunately, they were unable to marketize a lot of the stuff that we were using internal.
And I will also say that as we get into our careers and stuff, one of the biggest problems that Digital had was a lot of their products weren't usable. It was all sort of seat of the pants engineering. Great technology. The stuff could do wonderful things, but it took people a year to learn how to use.
Yeah, they were amazing technologies. Yeah. But usability was definitely a problem.
Yeah, they didn't know what it was. They didn't know what it was. At least the engineers I work with, they had no idea what usability was. They didn't know the concepts. They didn't understand.
And that's the genesis of how Archie and I started getting together and talking usability.
Yep.
All right. So some of the other companies, I worked at a ton of startups. I don't think any of them exist.
I know I worked with you at one, which didn't last very long.
Yeah, it was great ideas, great products. We're going to be telling stories about those, how they worked, where they failed. And one of the things I wanted to call this podcast was how to succeed in failing businesses, because that's exactly what we did. We became very successful in doing what we did and furthered our careers while these companies died off.
Yes.
Okay, so those are the stories that we'll be talking about in future podcasts.
Get down and dirty in some of the details and some of the things we did as things were crumbling around us, as well as how we envisioned our careers and how we made our careers in the end.
And some of the hijinks, don't be afraid to take chances. You're going to hear that again and again.
And have fun.
Definitely have fun.
Have fun.
So this is our introductory podcast. We hope that you understand where we're going, and we hope that you tune in for the what we'll call the meat, the real stories. Anything else?
At this point, no. I just stay tuned. I think that people will get a lot out of what we have to say. Well, they'll see.
Podcast number 2. It'll be worth it.
There you go.
Right. Thank you for listening, and we'd like to thank Sterling-Lancaster Community TV for providing the equipment, recording us, and making this podcast happen.